Welcome back to the Unconventional Coach podcast. Today I am joined with Lola, who is sleeping on the sofa, but you cannot see her. However, you might hear her snoring, so I do apologise if you do. I actually recorded this podcast yesterday, and it just didn't. To me, it's the first time I've actually re-recorded a podcast, and I feel like one of the reasons why I felt the need to re-record it is because it actually doesn't feel right talking about this, which is wrong. Okay, so in light of the current not situation with what's going on at the moment with I'm just struggling to find my words. Honestly, it's such a hard subject to talk about. Basically, I kind of want to give tribute to that poor girl that lost her life um, the other day, and there's been all this uproar about female rights and all this stuff about rape and that whole text me when you get home. And it just really got me thinking how much as a society and how as an individual we just brush stuff off that happens to us and that has happened to us throughout our life as women. And that's not to say that men don't get raped, that's not to say men don't get abused, because they do. However, statistically speaking, women are on the firing end of men's anger, men's frustration. And there's a woman that I follow on Instagram. Her name's Florence Given. She's very much like a big feminist, and I actually really enjoy her content. And she done a video the other day, basically since the unfortunate event of Sarah Everard, the hashtag not all men is the hashtag going round on Instagram is like trending at the moment. And she basically said that people were commenting saying, well, I'm a man and I'm scared at walking home at night. And she said, who are you scared of? And the answer is other men. They're not scared of women, they are scared of other men. And before I go off on a tangent, I just want to basically say the reason why I'm recording this podcast is because I want to encourage people to, well, not people, I want to encourage women to use your voice, to not feel shame about potentially what has happened to you in the past. And it's easy to feel shame when someone looks at you a certain way, or you know what I mean, if you've got some weird pervy man checking you out, you feel icky. That's the best way I can explain it. You feel icky, and they make you feel icky about themselves when actually it's them. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about in this podcast is basically my experience as a woman, and some stuff that, well, one thing in particular that I've never actually spoken about before, and something that I brushed off as a child. And it only until, I think it was honestly a couple years ago, I actually said to my partner this, what had happened to me. And he was like, what the fuck? Why have you never spoken about this before? And I was like, oh, I just didn't really think it was important. The outcome of this podcast is I just want to encourage anyone listening to open up about potentially something that has happened to them. But before I go into that any deeper, the first thing I want to do is I actually want to spout some facts at you guys, because when you hear the facts, they're really fucking hard to ignore. And I feel like the last couple years, a lot more women are speaking out on social media. I feel like a lot more women are actually pointing out the differences between being a female in society, because there fucking is, okay? There's this whole this thing going on at the moment about some COVID vaccines and how they increase your risk of blood clots, but they don't, and they've been pulled off the market. They're like, oh no, they give people blood clots, or there's a risk of blood clots. But the risk of you getting a blood clot by taking a contraceptive pill, which a very high percentage of women across the world take, is far greater than that of the COVID vaccine. However, we still continue to, and pills are encouraged, like taking the contraceptive pill is encouraged by doctors. And guess what, ladies? They're not fucking good for you. I'm not a hormone specialist, but if you want to learn more about that sort of things, I would highly recommend the book Period Power. And honestly, I think that's where I first realised that actually women are not treated equally. And women have a lot of shit done to them, and we are at a disadvantage, and it's wrong. And honestly, the book Period Power, if you're new to this, like I would never sound like just yet, I'm not a hardcore feminist just yet, because I don't really know what that entails, but I definitely know that I am becoming more aware of what being a woman means to me, and unfortunately how there is still so much non-equality for women in society. But I just want to talk about some facts first, and then I'm going to talk about my experiences and just be really open and honest. So some facts for you. In the year ending of March 2019, 1.6 million women experienced domestic abuse. I can only imagine that statistic has drastically increased since we've been in lockdown. This is year ending March 2019. What does that mean? Does that mean March 2018 to March 2019? Oh, we're in 2021 anyway. Yeah, so I can only imagine. Sorry, my brain just kind of shat its pants then. I can only imagine that number has drastically gone up. And that's just in the UK. That's just in the UK and Wales. 1.6 million women experience domestic abuse. And like I say, I know, well, we know that's gone up because there was those 5 women that got killed by their partners in the lockdown in like a couple weeks, which is just ridiculous. Where's that fucking news coverage, eh? UK and Wales alone, 2 women a week are killed by a current or former partner. So poor Sarah Everard, I don't know the ins and outs of the case just yet. I don't know whether I think the police officer's been taken into custody. I don't know if he is a former lover or whatever. But 2 women a week are killed by their current and former partners. So you know that she is not the only woman that lost her life that week from a man, okay? 1 in 3 women 16 to 59 will experience domestic abuse. 90% of all acts of rape, this one, right, 90% of all acts of rape happen from someone you know. How fucking scary is that? There is a higher chance of you being raped by someone you know than someone random on the street, okay? And that just makes me sick to my stomach. 20% of women in refugees are pregnant or recently had a baby. The only reason I put that one in is obviously that's important to me, being a mother myself. 85% of those experiencing domestic violence sought for help an average of 5 times. I'll repeat that. 5 times they look for help. They reach out to a professional for help to save them from their domestic abuser before they receive help and the abuse actually stops. 5 times. Less than 24% of abuse cases are prosecuted. I mean, is that just falling on deaf's ear? Is that what we're willing to accept in society? I'm not, and that's why I want to talk about things. I want to talk about the experiences that all women, I know all women, you may not have, and I when I recorded this podcast yesterday, I kept saying, oh, it sounds simple, it sounds silly, and I had a girl reach out to me on social media that I'm actually going to pull up her message now. And, she sent me a voice note, which I can't listen to because it's anonymous. So I basically asked if anyone wanted to open up about an experience they had. And she said, my driving instructor would always make comments to me asking if I had a boyfriend, calling me pretty, etc. Once he told me to drive to a place on a lesson I was paying for because a chip in his windscreen needed fixing. They came out to fix it, and he said they only came out so quick because he said he had a pretty girl in the car. He put me off driving at 20, and I still haven't passed years later. Creepy men staring at the gym and not looking away even if I stare back. Men shouting in the street. I worked in a hospital for years, and one day a customer told me to put my ass away because it was too nice. I was wearing trousers. Ugh. And then she said, and I said this to her, she said, there are pretty small things that they think are compliments, but they really make me feel anxious going out. Did you hear what she said there? They're really small things. That's not small things. You never know. You never know what could have happened on one of those driving lessons. And it's awful that we justify men's behaviour and we say, oh, it's just men being men. We say, oh, it's just typical men in a white van. And that's not me saying every man who drives a white van is a fucking prick who stares at your ass and bibs at you. But this happens every day. I don't know one woman that hasn't had a car aggressively bib at her and shout out the window. What? Why? That sounds silly, but it's not, because we shouldn't accept that, and it should not be a thing in society to catcall fucking women like we are animals, because we are not. And the fact that we try and justify it for men is a huge fucking red flag, and it's not right. The whole text me when you get home thing is a massive one that's trending on social media at the moment, and it's so true. Like, I'm going to use the example of my gym. So at the moment, obviously we're in lockdown. I'm using a container as a gym, and the first time I went to that container, I had to go at night because that's the only time I can train. Obviously I have a son and I work, so the evenings is the best time for me to train, because I train at like 7:30. By the time I get home, it's 8:39. I shower, if I'm lucky, to be honest. Most times I don't shower. I eat, and then I go to bed. So it just works out best for me. And the first time I went to the gym at night, I took a knife with me because I was scared. Kitchen knife. It's still in my gym. I have a kitchen knife in my container gym because I'm fucking scared of being there alone at night as a woman. I got to the gym, and I even said this to myself the other day. I went there, I think Tuesday night, and I was training and I was doing some deadlifts, and I was like a little bit loud, and like the weight like sort of slammed on the floor, and in my head I said like, oh, be quiet, because if anyone's here and they hear you, well, they might come over to your container. And the first time I trained in that gym, I didn't have any music on. I kid you not, every noise, I was terrified. And do you know what else I do when I train in my gym? I put my phone on the opposite end of the container. So you've obviously got the front bit with the door. I always put my phone at the other end of the container. And the logic behind that is if anyone comes in my gym while I'm training, I'm closer to my phone to call the police or call someone for help. I put the light on the bit by the door so it casts a shadow. So if I use the cable machine, which is on the other side, and I have my back to the door, I can see my own shadow, and I can see someone else's shadow if they come in. And again, you may think, well, yeah, you're just being smart. But I have a few other guys that use that gym, one being my partner. My partner laughed at me when I said I'm taking a knife. He was like, you don't need to take a knife. And I was like, but what if I do? What if I do need that? He's never thought I'll take a knife with me. He's not worried about going to the gym at night. He's not worried about being raped and killed. And I just can't express how we shouldn't feel like that. And the fact that we do is wrong. It's wrong that we feel like that. We've all done the whole putting your keys between your knuckles. And again, I'm almost I hate myself because I'm normalising it. I'm like, we've all done this. We've all done that. We've all had men shout us from their cars. We've had men grab us in clubs. Just because we've all had it done to us doesn't mean it's fucking right. And we need to normalise talking about this and shaming the people that do it. If you listen to this podcast and you know that someone you know shouts at women in their van or whatever. And again, that doesn't mean they're a rapist or a murderer, but it's not nice. Women don't want to be shouted at whilst they're walking somewhere. I remember years ago, I live in West Sussex, and not far from West Sussex there was a shooting in a village. There was a man was driving a car. Some of you might remember hearing about this on the news. There was a man driving a car, and he basically just shot a bunch of people while he was driving. And I remember I was walking home at night, and this car, I remember hearing about that story. I think I was about 13, 14, and I remember I was walking home, and every car that was like driving past me, I was like, oh, like cringing. I was like, oh, like it was just scary. But we've all had experiences, and I'm pretty confident that that is the case. I'm sure we've all had experiences, no matter how small you may think they are. You, it shouldn't be happening. That's what I'm trying to say. We've all done the whole pretending to be on the phone, putting the keys between your knuckles, and I've had experiences before, and the the first one that I'll say is probably the worst thing that's happened to me upon nearly getting kidnapped. Which I'm laughing about, but it's not funny. But I won't talk about that on this podcast. We'll do that on another episode. But the worst thing that happened to me as a child, and I've never spoken to anyone about this. The only other person that knows about this is my boyfriend. And the only reason I brought it up is because I think I was actually listening to, what was that? I can't even remember why. I just was like, oh, I just feel like I should tell him this. So what happened is basically behind my house, you've got like, well, my old house when I lived with my mum, my childhood house, you've got like a field. And I was playing on the field with my friend. I was probably about 5 or 6. And this man came up to us, and I've been debating whether or not I should actually reach out to the police, because my logic is if someone has done this, God knows what else they've done and potentially not been caught for. Um, the man in question, I know what he looks like. I do not know his name, but I know him, and I definitely would know him if I saw him. He rides a bike, and I lived in Crawley at the time. I would always see him just riding his bike. So he was probably about mid to late 20s. Um, and I was on the field with my friend, and he came up to us, and he just started talking to us. And again, I was about 5 or 6. And he ushered us over to like this corner. So basically you had the field, and then you had like a tree in the corner, and it was kind of blocked by a house with like a bunch of ivy. So it was still open, but it was round the corner as such. And I remember him just opening his trousers and being like, oh, like, look what's in there. And I'm like 5 or 6, and I'm like, what? Like, okay. I didn't have a dad either, so I did not know. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know what was there, if that made sense. And I remember like looking down his pants and like saw his penis, and he was like, oh, do you want to touch it? And I was like, oh, no. Like, and again, I can't even remember the ins and outs. I just remember being like, no. Um, and then he was encouraging us to put stones in his trousers. So me and my friend, who again, girl, 5, 6 years old, are putting stones in this guy's pants with his penis on show. His penis is right there, and he's put our hands on his penis. And I never thought about that until a couple years ago, and I thought, that's really fucked up what happened to me. It didn't affect me, like, and nothing happened from there. I remember him putting our hands around his penis, and I think we both just pulled away and left. I can't even remember if we ran, or I don't remember ever thinking, oh, I should tell my mum about that, or oh, that was weird. And do you know what I mean? Because when you're 5 or 6 years old, you don't understand those things. I didn't understand. And the thing is at that age, I knew what rape was. Like, my mum really instilled in me about predators and rape. Like, I knew exactly what it was. But I think because he was a familiar face, like, whenever I'd see him, he'd smile, and I remember I'd smile back at him. So other than that, we didn't have a lot of contact, but I think maybe because he was familiar. But I never thought that, I never brought that up to my mum. Even to this day, I've never told my mum about that. I've never told anyone about that until now, and I've told a few hundred people listening to my podcast about that. But that never came to my mind until a couple years ago, when I thought, actually, that's really fucked up. And maybe that's happened to you. And if it has, get it off your chest. There is no shame about it. I held a lot of shame around what happened to me as an innocent child. And I've been thinking this past few months, maybe I should contact the police, or because at the end of the day, if someone has done something like that, I hate to think of what else they may be done. Maybe they've raped a child and the child has never spoken about it, or perhaps they just don't remember, because when you're a child, you block out trauma. And I didn't block that out as like trauma, but I just never thought about it. I never thought that was worth talking about, because it never affected me. But other things that have happened to me as a child, I was grabbed by a group of gypsies on holiday, pinned up against the wall. They were trying to like kiss me. I don't remember how old they were. This was when I was a bit older. I was probably about 13, 14. And I know obviously gypsy culture is different, but just because it's in a culture doesn't mean it's right. If you do anything in a culture, do you know what I mean? It doesn't excuse it. But the main message I want to get from just talking about this is that I really just want to help anyone listening to this. If you have had something happen to you, there's no shame around it. There's no shame. And I would just really encourage you to voice it and accept that what has maybe happened isn't right. And it doesn't have to go as far as that, but maybe it does. If you have started intercourse with a man, if you're kissing and touching, and then you decide, actually, no, I don't want to have sex, and he still does it anyway, well, guess what? You don't have to do that. You don't have to do something because he wants it to. I just want women to have more of a voice. I want women to stand up for themselves. And it's not right, the abuse that women get on the daily. And you may not consider being shouted at from a van abuse, but it still doesn't excuse it. It still doesn't mean that it should be accepted in society. And I don't think we should accept that kind of behaviour. But like I say, I just wanted to voice some things that happened to me. And again, there's so much that's happened that I don't even think we ever, I mean, being called a bitch, like I remember one of the last times I went clubbing, sorry about that, folks, my audio recording stopped, or my video recording stopped. But yeah, as I was saying, one of the last times I went clubbing, like a few years ago, I remember there was this guy, and I remember spotting him in the club, and he was like, I remember him being really rude to a woman, and like talking to her and grabbing her and stuff. And then I remember when I was leaving, my friends were basically being really slow, so I kind of like walked ahead of them. And you know, like when you're in the queue for like a club or something, you've got like the gates that separate you, and you kind of go like in and out and in and out. I was like walking through one part of a gate, and he was on like the other, and he was shouting at me, and he was like, oi, 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 sexy, oi, oi. And I just ignored him, and he went, you fucking bitch. And I was like, sorry, excuse my man impression then, you fucking bitch, fucking stupid little slut. And I was just like, fuck off, like, really? Am I a stupid bitch because I didn't want to talk to you? Like, men need to learn to handle rejection, and men need to not let their fucking egos get in the way, and they should not let their ego treat women the way they do. We're not fucking objects. We are humans. And I remember I was waiting we got a limo up to London, which was where we were. And I remember I was walking towards the limo and I was waiting for my friends because they were taking so fucking long and they were like trailing behind me, like stumbling. And I was just standing waiting, and this guy came up to me and he was like, "Oh, I really like your dress." And I was like, "Oh, it's a play suit. I got a ASOS for like 10 quid." And he was like, "No way. Oh, it's really nice. You look really lovely." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And like I was with my current partner at the time, so do you know what I mean? He was so respectful and so lovely, and that just made up for the awful comment that the guy made before, called me a fucking bitch because I didn't want to talk to him. And I was like, ah, like that was so lovely, and that's how women should be treated. We shouldn't be shouted at and catcalled and disrespected, and we should not feel shame because of how men look at us and how men visualize us. Same with like breastfeeding, for example, right? So I breastfed Bear solely, and I remember my partner. So he's very funny with like boobs, which I guess you are if you're a man, because obviously for a man they are something you see as sexual, whereas for a woman, and especially, oh my god, if you're a breastfeeding mum, your boobs when you are breastfeeding, they are nothing but food. You have no shame anymore. I remember like when I first gave birth to Bear, we'd have like the midwives come round, and if he needed feeding, you just whack a boob out. And do you know what I mean? As a woman, and especially as a mum, you have no like, you're not it's just different. Boobs are different when you're a mum and when you breastfeed. But anyway, um Bear was hungry, and we were out in like a park or something, and I was like up to my partner, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna feed Bear." And he would always be like, "Oh no, don't, like, don't. I don't want people looking at you, and I don't want men to look at you." And I'm like, "Look, if they look, that's their problem. If they look and they see something sexual, that's not my fault. That's their problem. I'm just feeding my son, and you should never feel shame for doing that, okay? Like, and for anyone breastfeeding here, or if you are someone who wants to breastfeed, like, honestly, it's such a lovely experience, but you will get fucking weirdos. Um, there was one man who, I was in a coffee shop, I was in Pret, and surprise, surprise, Jamie was in Pret. If anyone follows me on Instagram here will know I love Pret. And I was in Pret, and I was with my friend actually. This is obviously before the whole lockdown and all that. And I was with Bear and I was feeding him, and I remember this guy walking past, and then he clocked that I was breastfeeding, and then he sat directly behind me. And I thought, you fucking freak. And my friend who I was with, she just stared at him the whole time and just made sure that if he did look up, he would meet her eyes and not see anything. But even then, like, don't feel guilty for how men view you. It's their problem. If you're breastfeeding and a guy sees your tit and he sexualizes it, that's his fucking problem. Like, we should not feel shame for our bodies. We should not feel shame for wearing clothes that show our skin. It's your body. Do what you want with it. And no one asked to be raped. Do you know what I mean? No, you cannot wear an outfit that can excuse someone raping you. And I actually saw this before I jumped on the podcast. It's a woman like holding a sign in protest, and it was saying that drug dealers get more time. This is obviously in America, but drug dealers get more time in jail than rapists, which is fucking awful. And then underneath it says buying drugs is a choice, rape is not. And it is so, I mean, just think about that. And the whole justice system is fucked. And I'm not in a position to change that. But if I can help inspire someone to open up about their experiences and help encourage someone else to speak out, then it's all going to go somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So that is all I have to say on this matter. I'm sorry if you didn't enjoy this podcast, and if it's not what you sort of signed up for with this podcast, but I'm very passionate about women. I love women. Since becoming a mother, I have so much more respect for women, and this is something that I still need to learn about. I had no clue how much the impact of like, and again going back to the book Period Power, but how much like tax is on them, and how that actually tampons have chemicals in them, the impact of contraceptive on your physical and your mental health, the fact that there was scientists that were sterilizing women in Africa. And again, I learned that all through Period Power, and that's just one book. Like, I cannot even imagine how scary it all is when you know all the facts. And I just want to encourage people, and I encourage women to learn more about being a woman, learn more about women's rights and what we still need to do to have equal rights, because we do not have equal rights. It is far from equal. We are still not equal in society, and that needs to change. So that is all I have to say on this podcast today. Paying tribute to any woman that is suffering from domestic abuse or rape, or if you are listening to this and you have been a victim of anything or are a victim now, please reach out to someone and get yourself some help. And if something happened to you a long time ago and you've never spoken about it, I would really encourage you to speak about it. Even if you wrote it down and set it on fire, you never know the impact or the hold that something that you may feel doesn't influence you has influenced you. There is no shame in what's happened to you. And as always, just take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves. Love yourselves, because you're all fucking awesome, okay? Right. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Unconventional Coach podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry if I didn't make a lot of sense, but I'm very new to this, and hopefully I can do another podcast with someone who's a bit more educated about things, and we can have a discussion about how to help women now. But yes, I will see you in the next podcast, everyone.